Okay. So throughout the world, Sweden is known by very few countries. Some of these countries don't have much knowledge about Sweden, but despite that, we're going to take the views and perception into consideration. So Sweden abroad is known by many things. Most recently, Sweden got known for Avicii and Swedish House Mafia. These are Swedish DJs that operate all over the world. And then there was mentioned something about the majority of the Swedish people living in a mountain. And then the ideology, of course, is pretty known abroad too, that we are socialist. And then there's a little known history fact about Sweden, once being Vikings. So is this true or untrue? I would definitely agree that the Swedish DJs have made quite an impression on representing Sweden. You can just look at the Swedish House Mafia name and you'll know that they're Swedish. When it comes to us living in mountains, that's not very accurate. Sweden is a civilized and modernized country. We live in cities, and I don't really think anyone for that matter lives in a mountain. And then the history fact about the Swedish people once being Vikings, that's relatively true. But it was mentioned in the previous presentations that there weren't actual warriors. Many of the Vikings were actual farmers. And then on the socialist part, the views there depends on which part you're from the US. If you're from the west of the US, such as in Los Angeles, you'll think of Sweden as long countryside and blonde girls. Whilst in the east, such as in New York, you'll think of Sweden as a socialist country. And I would agree that we are a pretty socialist country. We have free education, free healthcare, and we receive social contributions from the government daily, every month. So now if you compare the US to Sweden, you'll find many differences. One of the things is the voting system. In the US, the voting system is all about electoral votes. There's 538 electoral votes, and that number is because there's that many members of their Congress Parliament. If you're having difficulties of understanding the definition of Congress Parliament, you can just think of our Parliament, which is the Riksdag, which has 349 members. So if you want to become the president, you'll need the majority of... No. The 538 electoral votes is then divided into the 50 current United States, and whichever state has the highest population gets the more electoral votes. So states like California, Texas, and Florida and New York, they have a high population, so they give more electoral votes. So yes, there's a good example of an election that was determined by the electoral votes, and that's the election of 2000, where the two candidates were Al Gore and George Bush. So Al Gore got the more popular votes, which is a vote per person. He got like thousands more votes, but George Bush got the more electoral votes, so he became the president. George Bush is the red one over there. In Sweden, it's pretty simple with our voting system. Whoever gets the more popular votes gets to rule the country. There's no electoral votes in Sweden. Another difference between Sweden and the US is the salaries. According to a reliable source from salary statistics, a person in the US makes twice as much as a person in Sweden. So if you take, for example, surgeons and lawyers, people with those occupations in the US makes 1 million Swedish kronas, and they only have to pay 15% taxes, while a surgeon and a lawyer make 500,000 Swedish kronas, and they have to pay 30% taxes. Another thing is that a fireman in Sweden who jeopardizes his life makes as much as a hairdresser and a painter. The last thing I want to compare is the US and is the crimes. There's a long list. You don't have to look through everything. We're just going to take the intriguing one, the exciting ones. Murder is the same as in Sweden. Murder is a very horrible crime. But then it varies. The US has smuggling as the most second worst crime, and that's obviously because there are thousands of people get smuggled into the US each year. And another thing is that they have terrorism enlisted, and this is obviously because 9/11 bombing and the bombing of the Boston Marathon. And the crimes is determined by how common it is in a country. So in Sweden, we don't have terrorism because we haven't been exposed to terrorist attacks such as the ones in the US. Smuggling, like I mentioned previous, it's pretty common. Just look how easy it is to smuggle someone from Cuba to Florida. In Sweden, our most common crimes is theft, robbery, and assault.